Chapter 7. 2 weeks flew. Every ounce of physical, mental, and emotional strength was poured into repairing Land Escape's defenses. Through non-stop vigilance, gallons of elbow grease, and dashes of creative ingenuity, Vant, Skii, and the 57 remaining men, women, and children managed to close and secure the front gates, recalibrate the turrets, and patch the town's damaged infrastructure. Once stability had been restored, the manic pace slowed. The townspeople turned to reflection, and many to isolation. Grieving had begun once reality had set in. Their loved ones were lost, stolen away by a mysterious evil. The city was empty, filled only with a somber serenity. One could travel from one end of Land Escape to the other without seeing a single living soul. The atmosphere was coated with a dizzying silence, and loneliness permeated every square block. The metropolis desired to be full of life, but it was, instead, comatose. With every passing day, Vant knew the likelihood of a successful rescue decreased. The army that had abducted Land Escape's people had left no remains, no trail, and no hints as to its point of origin or next destination. In hopes of locating them through forensics, Vant brought the small piece of shrapnel, the one that came from the armored soldier he had destroyed, to a corpo bot in the center of town. He inserted it into the bot for identification, and sure enough, Vant's theory had been correct. It was indeed a type of thallium, a specialty composite known as thallium vorax. It featured dynamic properties and extreme malleability, but without the natural toxicity of thallium. This made it ideal for applications such as robotics and power conduction. Vant asked the bot to identify anyone or anything that may have recently purchased large quantities of the thallium alloy, but after emitting a rude tone, it noted that all sales transactions were private. Next, he requested geographic coordinates containing the highest concentration of the substance, but was answered by the same tone. He tried several more inquiries in the same line of questioning, and each time, he came up empty. The thallium army, along with its titan, had vanished. Skii's voice emanated from a device on Vant's wrist. He mashed buttons on the communicator bracelet in response, searching for the right one. Vant needed a way to be in constant contact with Skii and key townspeople, so they scrounged up enough capsules to make a sizable purchase from a corpo bot.
So I need bracelets for group or one-on-one communication. They should fit any size wrist, from a small child to an obese adult, or even a gauntlet. Lightweight, easy to use, no more than 1 inch thick, easily removable, black.
Vant learned long ago to be specific when ordering from corpo. Oftentimes, a consumer, after receiving an item, would have to drop whatever they just bought back into the bot for a costly amending of some too literal interpretation of the request. For example, Vant once ordered a box of chocolate hearts for his sweetheart, only to receive an ugly canvas container containing anatomically correct human heart-shaped chunks of chocolate. Corpo bots were amazing, efficient, and, for the right price, could construct anything one required, except for weapons. But the downside was their astoundingly literal functionality. Vant found the correct button and spoke into the wrist comm.
Hello?
We did it!
Skii's voice rang from the speaker.
You got in?
Sure did. Wasn't easy. Flu's arm is going to be in a sling for a while and Lyra's going to have a limp. But the vault is ours. I'm officially a bank robber. How great is that?
Nice,
Vant said. Once the township had been secured, this was the final task that required completion before they could depart.
How big is the score?
Rough guess, 1,000,000,000,000 pills. Seriously, I've never seen this much loot before. Looks like the town got invaded right before the deposits were going to be sent off to Corpo. Perfect timing. So, what do you want me to do now? Sit here and stare at all this loot? Because I'm fine with that.
Grab enough for basics and emergencies.
Vant heard a disapproving huff on the other end of the communicator.
That currency belongs to the townspeople. We only need enough to sustain us and for incidentals.
Yeah, and to buy me a new dress.
Fine, and to buy you a new dress. Not that Corpo knows a damn thing about fashion.
That's all about the boots anyway.
Take a few capsules and do what you want, then deposit something modest at a bot for our trip. When you're all done, well, let's get going.
Good. This place gives me the skeevies. I can already feel the guys wanting to rebuild society, if you catch my drift.
Make our investment and meet me back at the homestead.
Yep. Ski out.
Her voice cut off with a joyful squeal. He imagined her diving headfirst into a vault of corpal capsules, as if it were a pool. Before their rendezvous, Vant decided to take a detour, though he dragged his feet in getting there. He headed past the repaired main gate. He meandered across a park, dotted with neglected playground equipment. He wandered through the shopping district, filled with empty storefronts, peddling wares he did not need, sold by merchants nowhere to be found. He passed by the ransacked cemetery. Desecrated graves, unearthed soil, and broken tombstones littered the fields. It was not his destination, but near a pristine plot of grass, he noticed a townsperson kneeling in front of a handmade headstone. They met eyes. Vant nodded in acknowledgement. The man stood and approached. He appeared an honest work, manual labor type of guy, with piercing, moist blue eyes.
Ho there!
He said.
Hey,
Vant responded.
someone in this town pass away?
No, it's for my wife. She got taken in the invasion. Thought I'd put her to rest, or something like that.
She's still alive.
Vant said quickly.
I mean, if they wanted everyone dead, they just would have done it.
Figured as much. I guess I just needed somewhere to think about her and talk to her, if that don't sound too silly.
It doesn't, no. I've been known to do the same from time to time.
Graveyards seem the best place to do it. And it gives me a head start if we get bad news. At least I found her a good spot before the other ones get taken.
I hear you.
They both fell into a moment of silence. Then,
We haven't been formally introduced.
Yeah, I know who you are. Of course I do. I appreciate everything you and the girl have done for us. All of us do. It's a pleasure to formally make your acquaintance. I'm Sami Fromm.
Vant Hu'l. And now it's official.
Vant bowed his head in respect to the memorial.
And your wife?
Lam Fromm.
Vant raised an eyebrow. Sami smiled.
Funny name, huh?
Yeah.
She was Lamliel Iway. Beautiful name. She hitched with me, married a Fromm. Folks start calling her Lam Fromm for short. I mean, just think. A gorgeous name turned ugly the day she said I do. Poor gal.
Yeah.
Sami seemed to shake off a wave of emotion, coming in hard and fast.
I heard you're going after that army. You need a hand?
Not yet. First I have to find them. Then I have to know what we're up against, and in the meantime, we need decent men keeping order here. The rescue won't mean a thing if there's no home to come back to.
Sami appeared disheartened, but understanding. Vant added,
Listen, I promise when it's time to pick a fight, you will be the first guy I call.
Works for me.
The men shook hands.
It's been a pleasure chatting with you, Vant Hu'l. Thanks again. Lam Fromm thanks you too, wherever she is, no matter how things turn out for her.
Somehow, the conversation gave Vant the final push he needed to complete his task. He continued on his detour, toward a quiet pocket of cottages, and turned a corner onto an unassuming pathway. There, before his eyes, lay the former home of Skii Tavee. He sat down on the lawn, leaned against a tree, and stared at the house. It was smaller than he remembered. He picked blades of grass and tossed them, letting the wind take them away. He tried to recall some of the many visits to the home. They all kind of blended together. He pushed his mind harder, but his subconscious was stingy with granting access to the particulars. It was protecting him from hurt by keeping the memories locked away. His head provided only fragments of recollection, so instead, he turned to his heart. It reminded him by way of feeling of the love that had been his a lifetime ago. He drifted there for a while.
Surprised to see you here.
Skii's voice appeared from over his shoulder.
When you said meet at the homestead, I didn't think you meant mine.
Skii allowed Vant a moment to piece together the reason for their accidental meeting, then added,
Weird, huh? We both spent plenty of time here with the same woman, but in completely different ways.
Yeah.
It was kind of small anyway. I got used to sleeping under the stars, traveling with Dad. Guess I'm about to get my fill again.
Skii. About that, I know that we had an agreement, but are you sure you want to leave Landscape? I mean, maybe you're better off here.
I survived in the wild for years. Don't worry about me. You should be more worried about you. I know I am.
I don't like forcing you somewhere you don't want to be.
You saved my life. If I was stuck in that prison when the invasion hit, I would have been snatched up too. I owe you.
I don't know.
A deal's a deal. I'm looking for my dad anyway, and you need to know what he knows. No one is more familiar with dogmatic townships than him. He may have seen that Thalium army. And trust me, that's the only way you're going to find them. I went outside the gates and I checked for a trail. Don't ask me how the snick they did it, but they covered their tracks to perfection.
Skii hushed up suddenly and scrutinized Vant.
What?
He asked uncomfortably.
Look, if I take you to my dad, you have to promise me something. That this isn't some lover's quarrel. I know he ended up with your gal and he made me with her, but you have to swear you're not looking to start trouble.
It's the furthest thing from my mind.
It wasn't. But Vant really did require the man's information. He changed the subject.
I've been marinating on our plan. Are you certain about our destination?
It was the last place I saw my dad. He might still be there. If not, maybe somebody knows where he is.
We'll need to move fast. The army may be headed their way. And the town should be warned everyone deserves a fighting chance. Even them.
Looks like we're going on a hike together. Lucky you.
Lucky me, come on.
Vant said as he stood.
Let's get moving.
They packed lightly for their trip. That is to say, they packed practically nothing. Skii carried only her pill purse, a canvas blanket, and Cassidy strapped to her back. She wore her new dress, a custom order from Corpo, created from a dark synthetic material. It was practical, sewn-in gloves, completely waterproof, sleeves and leggings that could be rolled down for warmth, but also reversible into a bright blood red and orange color for special occasions.
Even in the wilderness, never sacrifice fashion for comfort,
she said to Vant when he paid her a backhanded compliment on the purchase. When he pressed harder, she insisted a dress was the perfect clothing for travel.
To see which way the wind is blowing, all I have to do is look down.
Vant shouldered the satchel containing his whip gauntlets, a pill pouch, and Death's mask. He considered loading up on material goods, hunting equipment, torches, and a tent, but Skii vetoed them all. She had traveled for years in the wild and had this to say on the topic.
Each additional thing you carry is something someone will want.
Outside the walls of any township meant danger, and most deserters lasted mere moments before being sabotaged by nomads who held extreme advantage in the wild. Skii added that the wilderness provided for every basic need: fire, food, shelter, water, and weapons, if one knew where to look. So, no supplies. Their plan: don't be a target, stay hidden, appear to prying eyes as if they had nothing of value. They had one thing going in their favor. The city had recently crawled with maniacal soldiers, so the nomads who usually stalked their prey outside Landscape's walls had fled. While their absence would not last forever, Vant and Skii were currently afforded a clear exit out of town. They said their goodbyes to the townspeople who had amassed to see them off. Vant and Skii agreed to keep in contact via wrist communicator and provide updates on their progress. A few of the ladies hugged Vant for longer than necessary amounts of time. Skii overdramatically gagged in a public display of pure tact.
Take care, Vant Hu'l,
said Sami Fromm.
We're all with you, even though we won't be with you.
Vant gave him a hearty handshake.
Keep the faith. Somebody has to.
Well, don't you worry about a thing,
said Cheris, dripping with snark.
Town's in good hands. I mean, if I'd gone after that army like I wanted, our people would probably be home by now, but no matter. I'm sure you'll do just fine.
Sami and Gino rolled their eyes. It made Vant crack a grin, a rarity. He slapped Cheris on the shoulder and said,
Okay, all right, I'll see you soon. You can count on that.
You troublemakers gonna behave while we're gone?
Skii asked Bomp and Frey, each of whom were holding furry friends in their arms. Bomp held a puppy, and Frey a couple of snowshoe hares. Skii had put them in charge of rounding up the orphaned house pets and consolidating them into one place. Bomp and Frey's Zoo, it was affectionately called.
Behave? With a whole empty town to run around in? Yeah, right.
Said Bomp. Skii hissed at him like a cat and swatted at his head. He apparently needed another Bomp to help him think clearly.
I'm kidding, Skii.
He said, defending against her onslaught.
I'll be good.
All right, just for that, I'm putting Frey in charge.
Okay.
Frey said, nuzzling the big-eared hares in his arms. Vant and Skii were not very impressive champions, a lanky maverick and a tiny teenager, but they were the best the citizens had. They set off. Warm applause accompanied their walk toward the main gates.
Wait, thought of something.
She approached a corpo bot and said,
Leave a message for Geist's flyer.
The bot chirped an acknowledgement.
Dad, we need to talk. If you're even alive.
She paused, thought, opened her mouth to say something profound, then changed her mind. Finally,
Maybe I'll see you in Crashtown. End message.
she rejoined Vant.
Let's go.
They crossed through the cracked gates. The doors sealed behind them. They hiked through the blue forest and into the adjoining arbor fields. Lumber farms existed before Corpo had rendered the forestry trade obsolete, and before it had become too dangerous to develop industry outside the township walls. The terrain stretched on for a mile or so. At first, Vant trailed behind Skii. She repeatedly threw looks over her shoulder to ensure he kept up. He tried to walk alongside her, but she insisted his loud breathing was an annoyance. No matter what their formation, their rhythm was all out of whack.
Stop that.
Stop what?
You're walking at a pace with me.
I'm what?
When I walk, you walk. You're at a pace with me. It's like I have a gangly man shadow.
When I walk too fast, you get upset. When I walk too slow...
Figure it out. You're a smart fella.
With effort, Vant discovered a passable placement a few steps shy of Skii and slightly off to the side. It seemed the winning combination, except the map on Ski's arm was too enticing to ignore. When she was unaware, Vant would steal glances at her tattoo in an attempt to pick up tidbits about their trek. But the design bounced up and down with her strides, so maintaining a clear view became a nauseating affair.
Hey,
Skii came to an abrupt halt.
What?
I'm on to you. You're fixated on my tattoo.
Busted.
I am not.
I told you, I know the way.
I trust you. I do.
If you're trying to memorize my map and ditch
Why?
me,
No, why would I do that?
you're never gonna figure it out. My dad used a system that only he and I understand. The colors represent things you wouldn't expect. The swooshes are paths, but certain ones are decoys. The dots and symbols all mean something they shouldn't, and it's reversed and it's backwards, but only in parts. You can stare at this thing for hours, and it would never make a lick of sense unless you know how to decode it.
Vant conceded.
Your dad was pretty smart.
Something like that. Plus, this is only half the map. It only tells half the story.
Where's the other half?
Like everything else in my life, gone.
They continued walking.
I wasn't going to ditch you.
Vant stayed quiet. He made a concerted effort not to walk at the same pace as she did. It was hard to do. After a time,
Sorry. Touchy subject.
I understand.
he kept his mouth shut for a while, which was for the best, as they were entering into more dangerous territory. They traveled for 12 hours, non-stop. Skii had insane stamina. The girl never rested. She never stopped to admire the sights, and never stopped to catch her breath. The outlying areas were her turf. She was home, though it was a home she had never wanted. Her and her father's predicament had forced their hands. They had left the comforts of land escape to endure the uncertainty of the outside world, and in surviving its dangers, She had become an expert on it. The hike was unrelenting. They moved as if an adversary secretly stalked them. Each deliberate step felt like a gamble, like it had the potential for drawing unwanted attention. Skii walked on the brink of a run, her breathing rapid, yet mechanical. She kept her heart rate up, and her awareness peaked. She never scaled obstacles, she always circumvented them. Approaching a fallen tree no more than 2 feet thick, she took the long way around instead of making a quick hop over the trunk. Vant had no idea why. The noise? Disruption of the rhythm of her movement? Fear of spraining an ankle or leaving a trail? The rationale escaped him, but although grueling, he did as she did. Vant was an experienced journeyman. Hell, he had trudged for years across a desert wasteland. But he had never moved at such an intense pace for such a substantial duration. After sunset, they slowed their strides and backtracked. They zigged and zagged and ducked and weaved through the brush in silence. She led them more than a quarter mile out of their way to ditch any potential hidden threats. When night fell, they made camp in a nondescript plot of forest. The location held no strategic advantage other than its total randomness. Skii found an elevated plot of dirt, sat upright with Cassidy on her lap, and entered into a state of deep concentration. Her posture spoke for her. She was scanning the forest with her senses for any unnatural stimuli. Vant did the same, mirroring her every move, attempting to absorb her skills through muscle memory. After a solid hour, which tested Vant's patience and the strength of his back, Skii disengaged from her intense focus. She gifted herself a cat-like stretch. No ceremony, celebration, or comforts of any kind were to be enjoyed at day's end. Skii nixed a campfire, a hunting expedition, and a leisurely bathroom break by way of her unyielding silence. Her non-verbal demeanor also asserted that there was to be no talking, no exceptions. A word, whisper, or even a cough meant someone a half-mile away might detect the vibrations, thereby making them a target for predators. Vant picked up on her cues. Skii knew this world far better than he did, and many of his instincts were ill-considered compared to hers. Case in point, he had opted for nighttime travel and daytime sleeping in his prior journeys, which, in retrospect, was a terrible idea. First, this meant movement and noise when nocturnal hunters were at their peak. And second, during the day, travelers were exposed and easily spotted anyway. That was the time to be in constant motion. Fine-tuned during her formative years, Skii had perfected this rigorous methodology designed for one purpose: non-detection. Vant felt sympathy for her. To live like this as a young girl, an entire existence dedicated to remaining unseen, and with a sick mother motivating every step. His heart sank, and it dropped even further when he viewed a bittersweet sight that evening at bedtime. Skii hugged her teddy bear shotgun with vice-like arms. The embrace was so tight that were Cassidy a real bear, she would have been strangled to death. Vant pieced together the puzzle. Her dad, clever man that he was, must have wanted his daughter to protect herself at all times. So he made her a defensive weapon, a concussive shotgun that repels instead of kills. He would have insisted she carry the armament everywhere and even sleep with it at night for safety. So he gave it a personality, something she could adore. Skii's bed looked impenetrable, shutting out the cold and the noise of the forest and making her near undetectable to prying eyes. The day of traveling had drained Vant's energy, but he stayed awake a touch longer after she fell asleep. He reflected on their first day and tried to figure out his unlikely companion, this gifted survivalist and daughter of his departed beloved. He also wanted to feel useful, as if he were protecting her, even if only for a few moments. So, through heavy eyes, he watched the wilderness. Soon, however, he wrapped himself within his cloak, and helpless to sleep's onslaught, he succumbed.
He dreamed of death among clouds of smoke. torturing, laughing, manipulating. A pool of blood with jagged teeth.
Vant was jarred awake. Skii's boot was tapping against his temple.
Can you poop?
He was not quite sure what she was asking. All he could manage was,
Can you poop? If so, poop.
he sat upright, wiped the dry crusties from his eye sockets, and looked at her quizzically.
We're a half mile from our route. Better to jettison here, what you'll eventually have to. Don't want to leave a trail.
No detail ignored. He obliged while she ran off to stretch and pinpoint their location. He noted the milestone marked by his final bowel movement. For the remainder of the journey, they would be living off corpo sustenance capsules, which did not generate solid digestive waste. After this important business was completed, and subsequently buried, they began hoofing it again. A few quiet hours later, they entered into a dry canyon. Skii explained that the rocks would dampen their noise, so the next several miles between the gully walls would be safe to talk. To be certain, Vant verified their safety by briefly donning Death's mask, which revealed a lack of hidden threats. After some conversation false starts, Skii paused to investigate some geology.
Remnants.
She said, running some pieces of material between her fingers.
Of what?
Roadways, bridges, something overhead, hundreds of years ago. Man-made, see? Nature wouldn't make this.
She handed the pieces to Vant, who studied them. They were like concrete, and they left a tar-like residue on his fingertips.
The world before the shift.
You really are older than you look. Only old farts talk about that, and even they don't know much about it.
Vant said nothing.
Dad suspected the material meant links between the townships. Though I don't know why they ever needed to be connected. They all believe in such different things. Or so Dad said.
Oh, he would know. It sounds like you've seen a ton. That must have been hard on you. To wait while he went inside all his places?
A flock of birds flew in and out of the ravine. Skii spent a few moments identifying them, which gave her information about the geography that went over Vant's head. She pushed her finger to her lips to shush him as they tiptoed, careful not to startle the birds. An explosion of flutters rising into the sky would betray their location. When clear of the chirping threats, Skii picked up where she had left off.
Yeah, it was rough. But to cheer me up, he'd say, we always have hope that there's one for sure who can fix Mom. He'd tell me stories of a man who had the magic powers to save her.
Magic powers?
I was a kid. I believed everything Dad told me. And he said there was a magician who could heal her. The world's best magician.
World's best magician. I never heard of him. I've been in the world for quite a while.
He was a local myth. A celebrity that everyone in Landscape knew of, but no one had ever actually met. They loved to tell stories about him. Don't worry, Dad would say. We'll find the world's best magician and he'll fix Mom right up. And one day, we found him.
No, wait, really?
Yeah. We came across a caravan while camping in the outskirts. I mean, you could hear them a mile away, so we followed the noise and discovered a whole entourage. A circus, no joke. Like they used to have at Landscape, but bigger. Horses, tents, animals, and an entire military protecting them. Tanks and guns and bodyguards, totally unreal. And all over the carts and machines, there were these weird symbols.
Skii picked up a branch and drew an emblem in the dirt. It read W8M. She explained.
It stands for W, world, 8, best, M, magician. See the illusion? You can turn W8M upside down and it still says W8M. They had these marks all over their gear in all kinds of colors and patterns.
She reached down to scatter the remains of the logo, but paused. For a moment, it looked like she was going to leave it, like she wanted to leave it. But she didn't. Her survival instincts overrode her whimsy, and she wiped clean the patch of dirt.
We trailed them for days, along with tons of other curious strays. None of us had ever seen anything like it before. The security was crazy tight, and they wouldn't let any of us within 20 feet of the convoy. The magician never showed his face. We didn't know which cart he was in. If we had, Dad would have stormed the thing. We just followed and followed, hoping to get an audience with him at some point. We tailed the caravan straight to the gates of Crashtown.
There's plenty of money there to collect. Tons of people and all that.
Yeah, that's what we figured too. So, hundreds of us made camp around the edges of Crashtown while a bunch of others followed the circus inside. Dad left me with the crowd outside, which was safe and kind of a party. I'd been traveling with him for a long time at this point, so I knew how to take care of myself. He trusted me to get away if things got weird. He kissed me, told me he'd make sure it was okay for kids, and that he'd get us tickets to the magic show. I'd never been more excited in my life. Dad's eyes were all lit up, too. I'd never seen him that optimistic in, well, ever. So, yeah, he went in. And that was the last I saw of him.
And how long did you wait?
About a year.
That's awful.
A lifetime for a little girl. There were okay moments. Made friends with a group of wanderers, but one by one they started leaving, giving up hope. The thing was, once anyone ever entered Crashtown, we never saw them again. Dad had been inside tons of townships, but he always came back out. But this time really dragged on. Things turned desperate when pills ran low. Water grew scarce. Situation got tense. The outsides turned violent again, so I split.
Vant picked up on a detail she had glossed over.
Alone? Or with others?
Skii did not answer. Vant had stumbled upon another uncomfortable subject. He chose to let it go. They walked. A restlessness traveled with them on their voyage. A voyage that would take them so far out of their way, through so much danger, and toward a destination with so few guarantees. Still, Crashtown was as good a place to start as any. Vant and Skii had a symbiotic arrangement for the time being. Skii could seek out her father for some unfinished business, and Vant could meet a man with knowledge of the foes he might soon be confronting. Geis Flyer had first-hand experience with more dogmatic townships than anyone on the planet. So if there was someone who knew about wicked water-filled soldiers made of thallium who vacuumed up humans, it would be him.